Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in this evening. We have got, excuse me, Dr. Matthew Sweeney with our Criminal Justice Department, and he's going to speak with us about AI and public safety. So take it away, sir.
There we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Sweeney. I'm an adjunct instructor here at Purdue with the Criminal Justice Department. And then beyond that, I'm a senior researcher at the American Institutes for Research. And I do a lot in my general job with AI. It's something that I've learned to leverage for a lot of various purposes, and it's become extremely useful. So I wanted to kind of use this opportunity to kind of share what we can do with it that's beneficial and what can be done by pretty much anybody who can search on Google, and then how we can kind of go from there. When it comes to explaining what AI actually is, generally speaking, the kind of layman's term behind it is if you give information to a computer, it can generate information for you. So there's some kind of a back and forth. It can take what you've given it, it can modify itself, it can then give you more information. So over the years, which I grabbed a bunch of different definitions, including ChatGPT for one, that it's essentially a computer system that can perform tasks that would typically require human intelligence, such as learning, reasoning, problem solving. But we don't need a human to be involved, but we can almost treat it like one. Oh, excuse me. Now, some of the issues that have obviously emerged because of things like ChatGPT and AI, one of the biggest issues obviously is plagiarism. You can feed it information and it will generate out a response. But one of the significant issues with it often provides you the wrong information. It'll either just give you wrong information, it'll flagrantly make things up or fabricate information based on assumptions. For example, if you ask ChatGPT to generate a citation, it will always be fake. It will never generate a real citation because it's not connected to the internet. We'll kind of talk a little bit about that, about how to pick an AI and kind of to look into each one about what they can actually do. The last bit is training material. The artificial intelligence is only as good as the material that's used to train it. So, for example, ChatGPT was primarily trained on words, text information. It was trained on how to code, how to read and write in English, and that's about it. So when you start feeding it large-scale factual questions, it doesn't know the answers to them, but it'll make them up. And that's something that's kind of become a central part of where an AI deviates from being useful and what other AIs exist that often a lot of people don't actually know about. Now, there are some things that we can do with AI very easily, very quickly, and it can be extremely beneficial. The first is finding articles and resources. You can treat an AI, particularly a certain AI that I'll show you how to use it, to actually generate information for you, basically to get an advanced version of Google search that will generate a prompt and give you information based on what you're actually looking for. It'll also help you with spelling and syntax errors. So if you have it check out what you're writing and you just say, I want to know what grade level is this written at, it will generate that prompt. It will tell you based on what you've given it, the grade level that you're writing in. Or if you wanted to find certain issues with it, it will go through and check it against what it knows about grammar. And the last part is quick synopsis of information. Generally, an AI can absorb a vast amount of information, generate a response, and then spit out a small synopsis of it. I'm sure a lot of you have seen, I believe it's Amazon that recently rolled out, you can look through to see what the vast majority of reviews on a product say. It'll now give you a little blurb about like, these are the things that these reviewers are talking about. And I believe Facebook is also doing it as well with like group comments. If you see like an image and there's like thousands of comments on a picture, it will summarize the conversation that's occurring. So it's quickly synthesizing that information, gathering it, and generating a response. Now, there's good uses And there's good AIs depending on what you're looking to do. For example, ChatGPT has no external connection. You're talking to a computer that doesn't connect to the internet, can't find information that it doesn't already know about. And if you ask it questions that it doesn't know about, it will just answer them to the best of its ability, even if it's wrong. But it's very useful for coding advice, grammar and syntax, quickly synthesizing information, and it's basically good at guessing. It takes information, generates a response, and for the most part, it's generally right, but it will be wrong if you ask it for very specific information. One of the better AI tools that you can use that can be used, basically be leveraged for almost anything, is Microsoft's Copilot, which is connected to their Bing search engine. You've probably all seen lately, like the new Surface, Microsoft Surface laptops that are coming out are all saying that they're like Copilot ready, which means that they're integrating it basically to replace Cortana as kind of the digital assistant. But instead of it just being this kind of general AI that you can interact with, you're getting one that is much more engaged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to primarily show a little bit on how we can leverage Microsoft's Copilot to really kind of narrow in and use it effectively to really find what you're looking for. So one of the things that you can do is when you go to bing.com, you'll see right at the top, it says Copilot. When you click on that, it basically gives you, I just realized I'm blocking this. Move me. There we go. It'll give you a specific prompt. It'll say, ask me anything. So think of it like you're actually asking a friend for information about something who's really good at searching for it, and you know they'll find what you want them to find, right? So if you treat it like that, you can actually start to get more information. So the example that I picked was police de-escalation tactics. I wanted to know information about, oh, I went too far. There we go. That, in example, I have a college assignment to look up research about police de-escalation tactics. It will immediately generate responses. And it will give you information, including hyperlinks at the bottom here, to these specific sources that it's then referenced. ChatGPT won't do this. Copilot will, because Copilot can search this on the internet, generate the response based on an active website. The one thing that you'll notice here, most of these links are not actually like academic articles or authoritative sources. They're not .gov websites, .edu, and it only provides 6 sources. The nice thing about this, it remembers what you're talking about, so you can prompt it to actually give you additional information and to narrow down the scope of what you're looking for. So for example, I then prompted it again, so these are great, but I really need authoritative sources, peer-reviewed journals, government websites, academic websites. It immediately spit out a lot more information, particularly about with naming 2 different articles in a peer-reviewed journal and kind of where you could find them. Gave government websites that likely have sources, so including the National Institute of Justice and then the Police Executive Research Forum, which is a legitimate organization, and 2 academic websites, the Harvard Kennedy School and the University of Cincinnati. These are useful, but again, they're really broad. The only 2 that really give us anything useful are the first 2, the 2 peer-reviewed journals. So you can ask it again, I want the APA citation for 5 academic articles on police de-escalation research, right? The more specific of a statement that you give it, the more it is likely to generate exactly what you're looking for. So I chose it. I was like, generate the APA citation. Reason, I know it's going to include everything I need to find it, right? If a hyperlink exists, it'll give me it. It'll tell me the journal, the issue number, the version, or the volume in the issue number, pages, authors, and all of these sources here are linked below. So you can see 1 through 4. They're all linked, and all you have to do is click on each one of those links, and you'll access that particular journal article in that moment. One of the benefits that we see with this is that we're able to essentially narrow the scope of what we're doing from a specific point all the way down through exactly what we're looking for. So instead of just asking something to generate a specific guess on a question, we can actually get it to generate us exactly what we want in 5 minutes at most. What would have taken days or hours for somebody who's not as familiar with it, Copilot can generate this. And I think I probably spent 15 minutes at most putting this together. And that was even include thinking through it, trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go step by step. So if I knew what I was looking for, it'd be much faster. Now, you can also use it for content generation. What I mean by content generation is if you have a research project and you're just stumped and you're really confused, you don't really kind of know what idea you want to come up with, ask it. A professor wants me to come up with a research question about law enforcement and de-escalation. Could you give me a list of 10 possible questions that I could use to develop my question? Now you're given a list of 10 possible questions that you can use to then input into your own ideas and try to generate a new idea that you want to pursue, right? And again, it's like you can treat it like a close friend. You can bounce ideas off it, and it will generate a response based on the ideas that you've given it, as well as giving you more information and even feedback that generally sometimes a friend wouldn't give you kind of really good, solid feedback. So, for example, I then asked, is this a good research question? And presented a question. It said it's a good one, but it also gave me more information. It explained kind of the points to make it more specific, to have a measurable outcome attached to it, and to try to find a way to make it comparative. So it then suggests, here's an updated question that we think works better. It helps by taking your initial idea, improving it, and giving you more information about why it's better, to go back and re-inform what you're doing, and being able to then help kind of develop that out. It's a really great tool for using it, because often you end up just getting stumped. I know I do. I'm trying to come up with some reason I find I spend an hour on Google trying to like think of the right set of words to get the right statement. I jump on Copilot and I just ask it and I explain what I'm looking to do, and 80% of the time it generates the exact word I'm looking for the first time. Because again, it's taking the context of what you've given it and it's generating a response. So it really provides a lot of useful information that you can kind of take from there. Now, generative AI, I'm going to we'll do kind of some active examples in a bit. Once I get out of here, I didn't want to swap until we were there. It's really good and has a lot of capabilities to change fields dramatically and to really provide great information and do it much faster than we've ever been able to do it. However, it's only as intelligent as it's been developed. So if we're using it to circumvent certain parameters and original work, it will make stuff up. An interesting thing is that if you actually tell ChatGPT that it lied to you, it will apologize and then move on and just ignore the fact that it lied to you. So it'll apologize to you for lying if you correct it, but it won't remember that correction. So it'll generate the same wrong information again, because again, it's not networked. It's not learning additional information from what you're giving it. Whereas Copilot and other more networked connections can continue to learn new information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to hop out of here, and then I'll jump into an actual window. So that way we can see it. Okay. So when you open, I'm sure. Okay. I'm just trying to fix my own stuff here. So when you go to start, you basically get this window. You can actually see like my examples of what I was doing earlier. over here of like trying to generate it. So it'll save all of your information and actually be able to let you go back and figure it out. And you can disable personalization so it won't remember things that you tell it, or you can enable that. So it really is just dependent on what you want. Now, what I'll do is before I pick some random topic, because I always seem to go. So I have to look into that more, John. I do know there are certain plugins that can be added to Word. I know you can add it. I'm not 100% sure how. I haven't gotten that far on how to add it to Word, but I know you can. I don't actually know what percentage of students really know how to use Copilot, more so than just being able to generate information through ChatGPT. I do not know if it works with other languages. I would assume it does, but I haven't tested that myself. Generally speaking, because it's Microsoft, it probably is built into other languages. But I would assume it probably was initially developed in English, but I don't know for sure. So what I'll do is, since I know I'll just come up with the same idea that is always popping into my head when I'm talking about this, what's an idea of something that you want to find information about? Like a particular topic? Just throw one out. Global warming. I want to learn about global warming for a research assignment. So, and because I've asked it for specific, more, because I've asked it for like, I need specific research on this or authoritative sources, it'll now generate them more often for me just because of that. All right, so Crown Act. Does this seem right, Melissa? I haven't heard of it, so that's why I'm asking. But it seems pretty good if it came up with it. Yeah. Let's see. See, can you give me a 10 source list of academic journal articles about the Crown Act or related ones? And each one of these is then linked. It really depends, Grace. So I'll jump up to Rhonda and then I'll go back down to Grace. The biggest thing with the way that I look at this is that you can use it to find information, right? So if you're using it to generate information or generate ideas, it's essentially just like kicking around ideas with somebody else. Although generally you're talking to somebody who's very intelligent at that point. But it's about you to take what it's able to give you, like this list of sources, and use it in a paper and then start to read about it, right? So it's also really good at explaining things that might be overly complex in a much simpler way. And that's another kind of really great benefit. As far as Grace, the specificity that you need is really dependent on what you want. So, for example, if you wanted to learn about how plastic bottles, what the effect of plastic, I'll just ask it. What's the effect of single-use plastic bottles on global warming? So this is where you kind of get well, I guess you do get some sources with this one. Yeah, so here's a PBS article, World Economic Forum, Environmental Center at the University of Colorado, the United Nations, I forget what DP stands for, and then the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations. Let's see if it'll then generate this list. Yep. So limit this list to only academic journals that have DOI numbers. So it's kind of an iffy thing right now, Rhonda. Currently, there is no authoritative AI verification tool out there. Recent years, there's been some kind of speculation that when they've tested these tools using both AI generated work and work that has been done by a student that they know has been done by them, students where English is not their first language are significantly more likely to be flagged as AI than students where English is their first language. Generally, I think it has to do with the formality in writing. People who learn English generally learn it the proper way, whereas those of us where it's our native language, just like anybody where there's a native language, would have a more colloquial way of saying things. And we write as we speak. So generally, you would see that. My experience, it's easy to see. Once you've played around with AI long enough, it's fairly easy to see when a student, is using an AI to fully generate something. It's much more difficult to pick out smaller sections, but it's fairly easy, in my perspective, to see it when it's big. What do you mean, Molly? So I actually don't have any specific ones that I could share. Generally speaking, a lot of what I've seen, well, it can do that. So I can actually. So again, then it gives you citations to go along with it, right? But what if I then wanted it to say, instead of a 200 college course, so you can see how it changes it based on the level that you've asked it to refer in. Yes, it's easy to see it if you know how your students generally write, and in particular how some students will will write a certain way and others will not. It also does take a little bit more effort to actually uncover that. So, for example, one of the guidelines is I always reach out to students when I believe it's happened to ask them about it, to kind of prompt why, did you use this? What did you use? What did you feed it? Because there have been times that I believe that a student was using it because of a weird factor in it. But then when they explained their process, it made more sense as to why they wrote the way they did. By taking like the prompt. Do I ever alter? Not unless it's determined, not in response to like an AI accusation that I've noticed. So I have. I've used a lot of these different tools. They're all very different. Some of them will say it's 100% AI generated. Some of them will say it's not at all. So that's why there is no authoritative tool that can actually pick it out, as far as we know. Some of them will say it's 100% generated. Some will say it's 10%, 20, 30. Some will only pick out certain sections as being AI generated. It's because, again, it varies based on whether they used a certain tool or not. That's why I always kind of, again, I rely a lot more on the intricacies of a lot of these tools or a lot of AIs where they are generally not connected or not networked. So like ChatGPT doesn't have access to the internet. So if you start looking at the citations and the sources that are being used, you'll find some of them are fake. And if they're fake, I don't know why somebody would make them up or spend the time to try to come up with a journal name and especially because usually it's giving you a right journal name, but that article doesn't exist in that issue or that chapter or anything, or those pages. It doesn't exist there. For now, I always review, just turn it in. If there's something that I'm like kind of on the fence with, I may try other tools, but I generally stick to turn it in and then kind of just talk to the student from there to figure out if it's something and why and what they fed it and what their process is. So it's another like turnitin.com type tool that you can give text to and it'll help you to figure out. I think if I hit the wrong button, but I may be wrong. Turnitin can check for AI use. It is one of the options. Yes. Yeah, that's definitely, and that's why it's generally speaking, when it comes to kind of ethics and plagiarism and things like that, it's always important to look and see where things are coming from. And whether, because generally, for example, one of the course I'm teaching right now is an introductory level criminology course that uses a lot of worksheets with very direct questions. So I would expect that most of my students have relatively similar answers. So sometimes students have higher turnitin.com percentages purely because they're answering the same question. And it's hard to not answer the same question in the same way when everybody gets it right or when you're writing it as you should be. So it really is up to kind of that individual to look at it and see, is it large swaths of text or is it, 5 or 6 words here or there that are just common? It can be fairly similar. And that's also true with the AI. That's why often I see generally any lower percentage. It could depend, Rhonda, particularly if you have students who are, I don't like the non-traditional, but a student who maybe has been working for a number of years and then comes back to school where their language is far beyond what you would anticipate for a first semester student. Yeah, that is sometimes what you have to do, Samantha, to do kind of your own due diligence on the back end. Same with finding out if sources are not copied, if they're true, if they're real. Because sometimes it won't, I've noticed Turnitin like won't have like book text as part of its references. I'll do the same thing, Samantha. If it doesn't resolve, I'll go looking specifically for it, unless I know it off the top of my head. Yep, exactly, Molly. And that's often the case. You'll often see, generally, I only really pay it. I think the big thing is with Turnitin, unless it's over 50%, I will look kind of casually at it. Once it gets higher, that's when I start to look. I'm like, okay, where is it? What is it flagging? Because again, the interesting thing is that like a student who only writes one sentence per answer will likely have a higher Turnitin score. Do you mean turn it in, Grace? Yeah, it depends. And that's where kind of searching sources and comparing them can be useful. But again, that's what you kind of go through with your when you're considering this stuff is how do I find this information and when it's useful. And sometimes I find just having a belief and then just literally having a conversation with a student can be beneficial. Yeah, I always like to do stuff like this, Rhonda, in class. So students learn like, oh, I can actually use this and it won't just give me stuff. I can make it find what I'm looking for and use it like a database, basically. And that's a nice part about being able to do this type of stuff is I can see exactly how to do it and show this is how it works. Here's how you can really benefit from it. And here's how you can just find information. Like, what was I searching? I used Copilot like a week or so ago because we need to cap my chimney. My chimney didn't have a liner. We had our hot water tank went, so we replaced it with an electric one. We don't need the chimney anymore. It's not vented. So I was literally asking Copilot to help me figure out like the best thing to buy for a chimney cap and how to install it properly. And it was like walking me through sources and like websites and where I could buy it from. Definitely. Because Google is just relying on keywords and phrases. Bing and Copilot is actually communicating with you. I would say for right now, Copilot is the best one that I know of that provides the kind of greatest utility. I do know Google just started their Gemini, um, but I don't know how well that works. I know Copilot works really well. Gemini, I'm not 100% sure, and I haven't dug into it to like really test it out and try it both on like these examples of like grabbing academic stuff and then grabbing life stuff. You know, how do I fix a hole in drywall? Yeah, Copilot is also much more seasoned, I think is a good way to put it. It's been around a little bit longer, so it's been refined, and it's been basically since Microsoft purchased OpenAI, it's been getting much much faster and better as ChatGPT also improves. So as AI improves in OpenAI, so does it improve with Copilot because they're the same company now. They just kind of have their own unique uses. Yeah, definitely Copilot's the best one for academic type stuff. So like even now it's like prompting some like examples. It was like, how can I educate others? So like it's already generating responses. One of the interesting things that you can actually do is when and sometimes if you give it a really difficult prompt, it'll actually ask you to give it a minute. It'll actually like say, I need a little bit to put this information together. And then every so often, like every couple of minutes, you just click one of the options and it will like tell you whether it still needs time. And then eventually it'll generate what you're looking for. It's the first time I'd done that, I stumped it the other day, like asking it questions and making it more and more specific. And I actually stumped it and it had to like stop for a few minutes. ChatGPT has its benefits. That I don't know, Molly. I don't know if there's anything out there that would do that beyond a template that would already exist in Microsoft Word. You could ask it to check to make sure references are formatted correctly, or whether you're missing a comma or something should be italicized, and it will generate information based on like Purdue OWL. I don't know if it interferes with evidence-based research. I think it more enhances it because for the most part, AI is not integrated too much into research right now beyond people who are researching AI. Um, my company is tracking the use of AI within projects. And we use it. We actually have our own sandbox with OpenAI that we can actually basically build our own chatbot internally using the GPT engine and feed it information that we want it to have. And it's all for like research and testing purposes. But it's one of those things that it's kind of interesting that we're working on is creating chatbots that can search our internal systems and generate information for us. You know, how long does it usually take to do this? And we know from previous projects that it takes 6 months. As it advances, it becomes much easier to interact with and much easier to not have to go so in depth with the questions that you ask it. Once it learns enough about what its user is trying to get, it will generally pick up from where you left off. So if you always wanted authoritative sources, it'll often start only giving you those, or it'll often start only generating the information in APA formatting because you keep asking for it. I would assume so. Now I'm curious if I set my Bing into Spanish. Yep, it will run in Spanish. It'll run in any language that seems like it's compatible with Bing and Microsoft. Now I just have to figure out how to get out of this. There it is. All right. I figured it. What'd you say? I don't know if it's the most advanced. It's the most user friendly that I feel like gives the best responses. I think is the best way to put it. It's more user friendly than some AIs, but some AIs may give better, more specific responses, but they're not as user friendly or they're not public. Like some of the AIs that we'll use at my company are internal. They're not available unless you work for the American Institutes for Research and you're in a particular team that has access to this. You know, that one might be far and away the most advanced and better, but what is public and user friendly, it's Copilot right now. Uh, I would think so. I mean, there's a button down here on the right to speak to it. I think you can also feed it images. Yeah, you can use your microphone, you can feed it an image. So like, let me see if I can feed it an image. See if I have any like weird innocuous photos. There we go. I'm feeding it one of its own images just to see what it comes back with. Yeah, so it read the entire prompt and then it gave more information about it. Yeah, and as long as you give it approval to use your microphone, you can just speak and it will generate that information. You can pretty much feed it anything that you want or have an interest in, and it will generate out information. I mean, it'll even give you things like cooking tips, and if you know you have a bunch of ingredients and you need to make something with it, but you have no idea what to make, just give it all the ingredients and it'll come up with something. Yeah, especially if you know I only have these 6 ingredients. What can I make with these 6? And it will generate what it knows and what it can come up with. So what I'll do, now that we've kind of seen and gone through, that I don't know, Molly. I don't know how well they've integrated Copilot into the like Office 365 suite. It's possible, but I couldn't tell you for sure. So with Chat GPT, which is kind of like the other one that most people know about, um, what it's really good at is things like scripting. Right. So you can ask it to generate code to do something specific. And it will generate not only the code that's reproducible that you can put into a system, but also explain it. I'm not 100% sure, Melissa. The only AI I have paid for was when I paid to access the Chat GPT API so I could ask it questions as part of
I wanted to see that one damn story, and
a data set collection. So we were collecting data for a particular topic, and we were just querying it over and over again, asking it questions. That was the only time I've ever paid for it. And that was so that way I could have it connect to an external system. It's definitely the coding aspect of it is what I spend most of my day asking, how do I do this? And learning from it. And this is where it gets really useful. OpenAI or excuse me, not OpenAI, but Copilot can do the same thing, but generally Copilot will link you outward to try to find some other source. So Copilot's more about finding through a search engine, whereas ChatGPT will just generate information. Yeah, you could literally ask it, how do I say this? And so it'll not only give you the actual words, but it'll break it down to explain exactly what it is. Anything? Do you mean what it provides you, Andrea? Like you wouldn't be able to use it? Is that what like you're referring to?
I'm thinking that someone wrote the code and it's their, like it's copyrighted or something. Will it,
No,
it
no,
won't
you,
release that?
nope, you can use what it generates. So I'm just gonna, an example that I would use.
I'm thinking of like video games. They create this intense code for video games. Are they copying and, can they just paste that and use it elsewhere?
So essentially what it does here is it always will give you kind of a something that you can replicate. And a lot of times it's relying on basically the explanation files. So you can use the information, and like what I always end up doing is trying to combine them together. So like if I know if I need to learn how to do something specific, the biggest thing that I'm trying to figure out is how to do this. Because I don't need to know how to load data or like look at it. I just need to know how do I get it from one set to the next. So the code isn't necessarily proprietary. There's no protections on it. The only thing that it would generally they would ask you to do is cite, which I believe you can do now, but I may be wrong. There was a button somewhere at one point for citing OpenAI. But a lot of times it's just learning. It's just asking it questions, taking kind of the general guidance that it gives you and then modifying it to your specific example. And a lot of the code, particularly when you're asking for like just general help with certain coding languages, it's just general help. It's like what you can find. It's basically taking what you can find by searching for it online through like Stack Overflow and those other type of websites. And it's just putting it in one spot. Because this is very basic. Like it's very simple. That I can't help you with. I'm sorry. Yeah, most of it is open source, Andrea. In terms. Yeah, you can just sit there and ask it questions. Because that's so one thing that you can do with a lot of these AIs too is you can tell it information about itself as a prompt. So you can set it up to do certain things in certain styles. Right? So like you can tell it to, in the language of X person, I need you to write me this. And if it's a well-known figure, it generally can mimic it. Based on what it knows. Sometimes it'll get it wrong, but it will do what it knows or what it's based on. All right. I don't think there's any more questions. But if there is, please do fire away. I doubt it, Molly. Tony, I'm not 100% sure, but Tamika or Professor Yeoman will probably know. I'm sure it'll be made available.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Sweeney. That was really, really enlightening. I know I sure learned a lot on my side when it comes to AI as well. So just want to give you a great big thanks and thank you everybody for joining in. Don't forget, we have one more session next week. The IRB board conversations are going to be really very interesting for you folks that are moving forward with your education into getting your PhD and moving forward. So thank you so very much. We appreciate you coming and hanging out with us this evening for all of this awesome information.